this. This is the third period, and we've just started, I'm sorry, this is C period. We've just started part 3, and we've looked at the Russian, and we've answered several questions about the Russian being just a thrill seeker. But Marlowe seems to admire that because he's not trying to conquer Africa, or I think we said to civilize Africa, or to steal from Africa. He's just there to suffer, but to live. So I think that's kind of admirable. Isabella.
They had come together unavoidably like two ships, and calling near each other. Then lay rubbing sides of glass, I suppose. Kurtz wanted an audience, because on a certain occasion, when it came to the chorus, they had talked all night, or more properly, Kurtz had talked. He talked of everything, he said, quite transported. At the recollection, I forgot there was such a thing as sleep. The night did not seem to last an hour. Everything, of love too. He talked to you of love, I said, much amused. It isn't what you think, he cried almost passionately. It was in general. He made me see things. He threw his hands up. We were on deck at the time, and the headman of my woodcutters, lounging nearby, turned upon him his heavy, glittering eyes. I looked around, and I didn't know why, but I assure you that never before did this land, this river, this jungle, the very arch of this blazing sky appear to me so hopeless and so dark, so impenetrable to human thought, so pitiless to human weakness. And ever since you've been with him, of course, I said.
Okay, before you go, just highlight that where it said nothing. The very arch of the blazing sky. He says, never before did this land, this river, this jungle, the sky appear so hopeless, so dark, so impenetrable to human thought, so pitiless to human weakness. So this is, what's the word, nadir? You know what that word means? N-A-D-I-R. Opposite of zenith. The nadir. This is that, the lowest point of the story, maybe. When he says this, like this is the lowest point, where everything seemed futile and hopeless. I think that's probably significant. You know, we're traveling, and we've traveled down as far as we can go. Maybe there's more to see.
On the contrary, it appears their intercourse had been very much broken by various causes. He had, as he informed me proudly, managed to nurse Kurtz through 2 illnesses. He alluded to it as you would to some risky feat. But as a rule, Kurtz wandered alone, far in the depths of the forest, very often coming to the station. I had to wait days and days before he returned last night. Thought it was worth waiting for. Sometimes. What was he doing? Exploring what? I asked. Oh yes, of course. He had discovered lots of villages, a lake too. He did not know exactly in what direction it was. It was dangerous to inquire too much, but mostly his expeditions had been for ivory. But he had no goods to trade with by that time. I objected. There's a good lot of cartridges left even yet. He answered, looking noiselessly. Plainly, he raided the country. I said. He nodded, not alone, surely. He muttered something about the villages round the lake. Kurtz got the tribe to follow him, did he? I suggested. He fidgeted a little. They adored him, he said. The tone of these words was so extraordinary that I looked at him searchingly. It was curious to see his mingled eagerness and reluctance to speak of Kurtz. The man filled his life, occupied his thoughts, swayed his emotions. What can you expect? He burst out. He came to them with thunder and lightning, you know. They had never seen anything like it, and very terrible. He could be very terrible. You can't judge Mr. Kurt as you would an ordinary man. No, no, no.
If you can highlight that. First of all, it says, what did Kurtz do? The question is, 8. According to the Russian, what did Kurtz do in the wilderness? And who helped him? What's the answer to those 2 questions?
The Russian.
No. The tribes helped him, the native tribes, and what was he looking for? What was he looking for?
Ivory.
Ivory. And how would he get it? Where would it be, and how would he get it? He didn't kill any elephants and take it, so where did he get it? He stole it from him. He just took it, and he got tribes to help him do that. So then it says he could be very terrible. You can't judge Mr. Kurtz as you would an ordinary man. So he sounds almost like a god with a little g. He sounds, they treated him that way. Would you like to keep reading? You want me to read? Okay.
Now, just to give you an idea, I don't mind telling you, he wanted to shoot me too one day, but I don't judge him. Shoot you, I cried. What for? Well, I had a small lot of ivory the chief of that village near my house gave me. You see, I used to shoot game for him. He wanted it and wouldn't hear reason. He declared he would shoot me unless I gave him the ivory, and then he cleared out of the country, because he could do so and had a fancy for it. And there was nothing on earth to prevent him killing, and he jolly well pleased. And it was true, too. I gave him the ivory. What did I care? I didn't fear that. No, I couldn't leave him. I had to be careful, of course, till we got friendly again for a time. He had a second illness then. Afterwards, I had to keep out of the way, but I didn't mind. He was living for the most part in those villages on the lake. When he came down to the river sometimes, he would take to me, and sometimes it was better for me to be careful. This man suffered too much. He hated all this, and somehow he couldn't get away. When I had a chance, I begged him to try and leave while there was time. I offered to go back. He would say yes, and then he would remain, go off on another ivory hunt, disappear for weeks, forget himself amongst these people, forget himself, you know. Why, he's mad, I said. He protested indignantly. Mr. Kurtz could be mad. If I had heard him talk only 2 days ago, I wouldn't dare think such a thing. I had taken up my binoculars while we talked, and was looking at the shore, sweeping the limit of the forest at each side and at the back of the house.
You want to keep reading? Want me to?
Keep going.
Okay. I mean, it's a lot. There's no break there, so just stop and I'll read wherever you want to.
I'm waiting for Sierra to finish, so I could,
But,
I'm waiting for Sierra to finish.
oh, she's trying to get her to catch up.
I'm done.
Okay, you should go then.
Am I reading?
Yes.
Where are you?
Top of page 122.
I have to.
While he's talking to him, and did you notice that he's treated, I think, almost like a god, that you're afraid, the fear of, he induces fear and love at the same time. The Russian loved him, almost adored him as a leader or something, but the guy almost killed him. Kurtz almost shot him. And now he takes his binoculars and he's kind of looking around. That is, I think this is definitely Marlowe talking here. So you can read, yeah.
Okay.
The consciousness.
The consciousness of there being people in that bush, so silent, so quiet, as silent and quiet as a ruined house on the hill, made me uneasy. There was no sign on the face of nature of this amazing tale that was so much told as suggested to me in desolate exclamations, completed by shrugs and interrupted phrases, and hints ending in deep sighs. The woods were unmoved, like a mask, heavy, like the closed door of a prison. They looked with their air of hidden knowledge, of patient expectation, of unapproachable silence. The Russian was explaining to me that it was only lately that Mr. Kurtz had come down to the river, bringing along with him all the fighting men of that lake tribe. He had been absent for several months, getting himself adored, I suppose, and had come down unexpectedly with the intention to all appearance of making a raid either across the river or down the stream. Evidently, the appetite for more ivory had got the better of the, what shall I say, less material aspirations. However, he had got much worse suddenly. I heard he was lying helpless, and so I came up and took my chance, said the Russian. Oh, he is bad, very bad. I directed my glass to the house. There was no signs of lice, of life, but there was the ruined roof, the long mud wall peeping above the grass, with 3 little square window holes, no 2 of the same size. All this brought within reach of my hand, as it were, and then I made a brusque movement, and one of the remaining posts of that vanished fence leaped up in the field of my glass. You remember I told you I had been struck at the distance by certain attempts at ornamentation, rather remarkable in the ruinous aspect of the place. Now I had suddenly a nearer view, and its first result was to make me throw my head back as if before a blow. Then I went carefully from post to post with my glass, and I saw my mistake. These round knots were not ornamental, but symbolic. They were expressive and puzzling, striking and disturbing, food for thought, and also for the vultures if there had been any looking down from the sky. But at all events for such ants as were industrious enough to ascend the pole. those heads on the stakes if their faces had not been turned to the house. Only one, the first I had made out, was facing my way. I was not so shocked as you may think. The start back I had given was really nothing but a movement of surprise. I had expected to see a knob of wood there, you know. I returned deliberately to the first I had seen, and there it was, black, dried, sunken with closed eyelids. A head that seemed asleep at the top of that pole, and with a shrunken, dry lip showing a narrow white line of the teeth, was smiling, too, smiling continuously at some endless, jocose dream of that eternal slumber. I am not disclosing any trade secrets. In fact, the manager said that afterwards that Mr. Kurt's methods had ruined the district. I have no opinion on that point, but I want you clearly to understand there was nothing exactly profitable in these heads being there. They only showed that Mr. Kurtz lacked restraint in the gratification of his various lusts. There was something wanting in him, some small matter, which, when the pressing need arose, could not be found under his magnificent eloquence. Whether he knew of this deficiency himself, I can't say. I think the knowledge came to him at last, only at the very last. But the wilderness had found him out early, and had taken on him a terrible vengeance for the fantastic evasion. I think it had whispered to him things about himself which he did not know, things of which he had no conception till he took counsel with his great solitude. And the whisper had proved irresistibly fascinating. It echoed loudly within him, because he was hollow at the core. I put down the glass, and the head that had appeared near enough to be spoken to seemed at once to have leaped away from me into inaccessible distance.
Thank you. Remember earlier several pages, he had seen these stakes and he thought they were poles with ornaments at the top. What did they turn out to be? What's at the top?
With people's heads on.
People's heads, his enemies, likely his enemies. So, we did, how about number 9? How did the natives treat Kurtz? How was the Russian similar to these natives in his adoration of Kurtz? How did the natives feel about Kurtz? Yes, they adored him. They treated him like a god. And the Russian feels the same way. 10, why did Kurtz once threaten to shoot the Russian? Why does the Russian not judge Kurtz for that incident?
He has ivory.
Yeah, a little bit of ivory. Ivory given to him, and Kurtz wanted it. That seemed weird. I'll definitely take a picture of that.
I'm not done. Keep going. I gotta
11.
Write down my questions.
What does the Russian mean when he says of Kurtz, he hated all this and somehow he couldn't get away? And who does that remind you of that we read before we read this book? He
Dr.
hated
Jekyll.
it, but he couldn't get away. It's exactly like Dr. Jekyll. And I think
Victor Frankenstein.
I think what you're seeing here is a strong comparison between those two books. That Kurtz, there were two sides of Kurtz. The great man, the nice guy, the smart man who had compassion for Africans, and the guy that wanted to kill the brutes. Just like there were two sides to Jekyll. Which native customs, we're not there yet, I don't think. I'll read, we'll run out, I'll read a little bit more and we'll stop. The admirer of Mr. Kurtz, the Russian, was a bit crestfallen. In a hurried, indistinct voice, he began to assure me that he had not dared to take these, say, symbols down. He was not afraid of the natives. They would not stir till Mr. Kurtz gave the word. His ascendancy was extraordinary. The camps of these people surrounded the place, and the chiefs came every day to see him. They would crawl. I don't want to know anything of the ceremonies used when approaching Mr. Kurtz. I shouted, curious this feeling that came over me that such detail would be more intolerable than those heads on the stakes, drying on the stakes under Mr. Kurtz's window. After all, that was only a savage sight, while I seemed to, at one bound to have transported to some lightless region. What's another way to say lightless? In the name of the book is Heart of Darkness. First time he said that, a lightless region. Subtle horrors where pure, uncomplicated savagery was a positive relief, becoming everything that had a right to exist, obviously, in the sunshine. The young man looked at me with surprise. I suppose It did not occur to him that Mr. Kurtz was no idol of mine. He forgot I hadn't heard of any of these splendid monologues on what was it, of love, justice, conduct of life, or whatnot. If he had come to crawling before Mr. Kurtz, he crawled as much as the veriest savage of them all. I had no idea of the conditions, he said. Those heads were the heads of rebels. I shocked him excessively by laughing. Rebels? What would be the next definition I was to hear? There had been enemies, criminals, workers, and now these were rebels. Those rebellious heads looked very subdued to me on their sticks. You don't know how such a life tries a man like Mr. Kurtz, cried Kurtz's last disciple. Well, you know, and you, I said, I am a simple man. I have no great thoughts. I want nothing from anybody. How can you compare me to? His feelings were too much for speech. And suddenly he broke down. I don't understand, he groaned. I've been doing my best to keep him alive, and that's enough. I had no hand in all this. I have no abilities. There hasn't been a drop of medicine or a mouthful of invalid food for months here. He was shamefully abandoned. A man like this with such ideas, shamefully. I haven't slept for the last 10 nights. I think we can answer one more question. What native customs that were performed for Kurtz disgusted him? That when these native chieftains came to see him, he would make them crawl. Like get that, and what does that remind us? Does that remind you of that scene we had seen earlier about the steamship? Remember we pointed out how many times the word crawl was used? You remember that? Right, so that sort of foreshadowed this, the idea that the ultimate sign of subjugation is crawling before somebody. Look at 14. 13. What did Marlowe discover about the ornamented heads? You already know they were rebels. They were disobedient rebels who rebelled against his authority. 13. 14. What seems to be Marlowe's opinion of Kurtz at the point when the natives are bringing we're going to have to wait till Monday to see Kurtz. Kurtz is literally, you'll see him for the first time on the next page. After all these pages.
Kurtz is here.
I don't
Kurtz
want to
is
say
here.
anything, but I'm an artist.
Can I be honest?
Get out.
You're lying.
Get out.
I think,
I'd like to see you do better.
I don't like want to embarrass you.
You're actually.
isn't it ironic that Sierra is the one who draws the pictures when you are sitting in front of a bona fide artist?
Yeah, well, I draw better than this girl.
It's
I just
true. I can do it.
You can't.
That is actually true. I will admit it. Like, I've never seen anyone draw like that before. Like, ever. Never seen anyone draw
It's
that
so-
terrible.
It's so unique.
You know what's funny is that's exactly how I draw. Like, if someone were to ask me to draw, like,
That's
a
how I
scene,
draw for like projects.
that's what I mean. That would literally be it.
I just
Get the ivory, kill them, do better. What's he doing right here?
He's sad. He's in the wilderness.
No!
He's in the wilderness and he's getting taken
He is
over by
sad about
darkness.
He's got
You
intrusive
think he's
thoughts.
sad about it?
Oh my god.
Well, you said that he
Yeah.
couldn't get
We
away.
do not try to lick the
Kurt's
trees.
sick. I've got your medicine, Kurtz. Cough, cough. Kurt's threatening. Give me the ivory or die. What? And late night talks,
Why did you
Kurtz.
put what?
I didn't know who he was talking to, so.
That would be the, that would
Why'd
be
you
the
put
Russian.
what?
I put Russian in there.
What?
What?
What is this?
That's him talking.
Words.
I don't know what they were talking about. He just said they had late night talks.
Now that you tell me
Seems a
what
little
it
bit.
is. All right. I am going to include this, if Sierra.
What's
Sierra.
the tribe?
This is Sierra's diorama. This is her
I think you should get extra credit.
Extra credit right here.
visualization of the section we read today.
I'm gonna say tribes, I